It's May 2nd. Game 1, the Clippers brought a new hope. Game 2, the Grizzlies strike back. It's Andrew Hahn here. It's ClipperBlog Live. Let's bring in our panelists. From Brooklyn, Charlie Widows. From Oceanside, DJ Foster. From Los Angeles, Jordan Heimer. And calling in from Memphis, Nick Flint. Nick,
hey, everybody.
What did you see from the game? Did they get as tense down the stretch as it looked like on television, even when they were up 10?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you could. I think Lionel Hollins called a timeout just under 2 minutes left after I think the Charlie the Simmons three, and I was still thinking, oh, maybe Chris Paul can bring this back. Maybe somebody, another Nick Young explosion. But I mean, even when it was at 10 points, and it felt like the Grizzlies were maybe pulling away, you could tell they weren't really going to put the game away. But tonight the Clippers came up short, shockingly to me, on the offensive boards, and the turnovers were the Grizzlies' dream, basically. I think the fast break points were 20-3 or something like that, and that's really the story of the game, those fast break points and those rebounds. Extremely surprised how rattled even Chris Paul looked. Well, not rattled, but how funneled he was, basically. It felt like the Grizzlies dictated almost all of the action. They were playing right on the edge of out of control defensively. Closeouts were strong, even when the ball temporarily found an open man, and it was incredibly physical. I don't know if you could tell on TV, but Zach Randolph I thought was going to throw Blake down a couple of times, and down the stretch to see a couple of fouls they called on Zach Randolph in the fourth quarter, and to see him complain about them, I could not believe it, because he'd gotten away with murder all night in my eyes, which I think really benefited the Grizzlies because it was physical on both sides. But I think the Grizzlies were more prepared to play basketball that way.
Yeah, Nick, this is DJ. Do you think, the way I saw it, this is kind of quintessential Grizzlies basketball. This is exactly what they do as far as offensive rebounds, causing turnovers. If the Clippers play this type of game with the Grizzlies the rest of the series, did you ever feel basically that the Clippers had a chance to pull this out given the style of play that was going on?
Not by the style of play. This was exactly what the Grizzlies wanted. I think they dictated the play in terms of the physicality on the boards and in terms of forcing the turnovers. And the Grizzlies they were turned over, I think 12 times, 13 times over the course of the game, but it didn't hurt them nearly as much. The only thing that kept the Clippers alive was the talent, and I guess that was kind of the generic sports pundit kind of breakdown. It's talent and flash versus grit and grind, which is not totally true, but tonight it was, more or less.
Hey, Nick, it's Jordan. Obviously, the story coming out of this game is going to be largely the 16-4 offensive rebound difference. What were you seeing there? I mean, obviously the Clippers are usually a pretty good rebounding team. Who was missing assignments? Who was missing box outs? What were you seeing on the glass?
Well, I think a lot of it was because the Grizzlies did an excellent job. And, as much as we talk about the Clippers' issues on the glass and with turnovers, I really think the Grizzlies did a better job in terms of executing their offensive game plan from what you could see. Rudy Gay caught the ball in situations where he could get into the paint. Marc Gasol, I was surprised, was not as big of an issue for the Clippers as I thought it would be, but still his presence. It felt like the Grizzlies were forcing their way into positions where the Clippers were so collapsed that the only way they possibly had a chance on the boards with Zach Randolph, whoever waiting on the other side for a miss, or on the weak side for a missed shot, was to have some kind of wing rebounding or guard rebounding come down, and the Clippers don't have that at all. I think Chris Paul might be their only above average rebounder at the guard position, and Caron Butler, even if he was healthy, would not be helping out. He's a below average rebounder at the wing position. So when the Grizzlies executed their offense the way that they did, there was almost no hope on the glass, which is very worrisome because there is no answer for Rudy Gay in my eyes. There's no answer for some of the things the Grizzlies can do in terms of cross posts and off-ball cuts and things like that.
Nick, it's Charlie. First of all, don't forget about Eric Bledsoe as a rebounding guard.
That's true.
You mentioned Gasol kind of being taken out of what he wanted to do a little bit. Did you notice DeAndre being a lot more engaged than usual, or than game one? And also just for those gay shots, it looked like they were pretty contested. I mean, it looked like they did a decent job kind of getting in their face, but they were just...
Oh, very contested. The only issue was that they were contested from within, 4 feet from the rim in a lot of cases. Not all of them, but I felt like I almost missed out on Eric Bledsoe there because it felt like, what could he do if Zach Randolph was just waiting on the other edge? DJ, he could be an answer, so I take it back that there's no answer. It's hard to say if I felt like he was more engaged tonight regarding DeAndre. I felt like it's almost like our expectations are higher for him because we know the kind of impact he could have. But it felt like, he and Kenyon, I obviously didn't have the numbers sitting there in my seat, but it felt like their impact was virtually the same. We know that both of them, rotationally speaking, can hit the weak side, block shots, what have you. But, in terms of rebounding out of position, things like that, I didn't see it from anybody that well.
Last question, Nick. The Clippers had 20 turnovers in this game. A lot of uncharacteristic turnovers, a very high number. Do you think that that's a product of the Memphis defense, or just the Clippers not clicking?
So I think you could say, well, we haven't seen turnover troubles from the Clippers, but we have seen, a lack of chemistry maybe. There was maybe one possession tonight that I felt like I saw where the Grizzlies shut down the initial action, and the Grizzlies shut down the initial action often, but where the Grizzlies shut down the initial action, and then the Clippers actually managed to kick out. They swung the ball around for 2 passes. Nick Young was wide open. He drained a 3. I don't know if that was in the third quarter or the fourth quarter, but it was at some point there in the second half. And I realized that, 8 3-pointers aside, most of the Clippers' offense was coming from Chris Paul creating for himself, not for others so much, or, otherwise some pretty tough shots made. Blake Griffin did some damage, but also, how many turnovers did he end up with tonight? It felt like a lot.
Blake?
Anybody have
I think 4.
Yeah.
4. It felt like a lot more. And, I think I want to give the Grizzlies more credit than the Clippers in terms of, like I said, sort of dictating the flow, even when they were on defense, and being able to play aggressive and kind of funnel the ball to where they knew it was going to do the least damage, or forcing the Clippers to start initiating offense at all, late in the shot clock multiple times. We saw them initiate with maybe only 12, 11 seconds on the shot clock and get really where they wanted the ball in terms of an offensive look, and that's not good.
Nick, thanks for calling in. We know you have a long road home.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Get home safe.
I'll see you guys.
All right.
Later, Nick.
Nick Flint from the FedEx Forum. So, what do we think about this game, everyone? Charlie, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, the first thing that jumped out at me was it looked like they really did make adjustments from game one, especially early on. As I asked Nick, I thought DeAndre did get up in Gasol further out and kind of made it more difficult for him to distribute, which I thought, obviously he's a scorer, but he really makes them go when he's creating for others from the high post. But then again, that eventually led to, as Andrew, you tweeted during the game, that made them vulnerable to the rebounding differential that kind of sealed the deal for Memphis. It also, I thought it was a physical game both ways, and I thought they both battled, but just towards the end, it almost looked like the Clippers were, spent or beat up. I mean, all those guards that kept getting hurt, it just kind of, they didn't have what it took at the end to come back, and Memphis just did not relent on the defensive end.
Yeah, to follow up on what you said, Charlie, it was a game of adjustments, and what was striking to me was that it just seemed that for every adjustment the Clippers did make, Memphis had the right counter. It may have made sense to push those guys away from the basket, but, we were talking before we went on air about, okay, so then Blake ends up fronting Randolph to deny him the ball, but what happens is he's in terrible position. I was rewinding play after play and watching where Blake ended up on those rebounds. And he either ended up pushed totally under the basket, where basically it was, Zach Randolph had defensive rebounding position against him. And there was just a feeling to me that even though this was the second game and we talked a lot about the jitters being over, there was still a lack of comfortable decision making for some of the Clippers' younger players. And I don't know if I'm making too much of that and kind of that, sports yackers type of cliche. But like, for instance, in the first half, it felt like Blake was really making tentative decisions with the ball. A lot of times he would have the ball, facing the basket against Marc Gasol with a little room, and instead of attacking the basket, he was kind of overpassing, and he was kind of, if you can say that you're forcing a pass when you're scoring big man, it was like he was looking to over-distribute rather than to take advantage of some of these mismatches and be as aggressive as I think he normally would be in a regular season game. So I'm interested to see how both those things play out in Game 3, because I don't know, unfortunately, if there's an answer necessarily for those problems. I don't know. Weird game.
Yeah, very, very weird game. I think if you look at it and... Oh, sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, weird game was the end of my
I'm sorry. My screen is lagging a little bit. I saw your mouth moving, no words coming out. I was watching like a kung fu flick or something. No, I think if you look at this game just statistically, the Clippers shot 54%. Grizzlies were like 2 for 12 from 3, and they lose. It's just, if I were Vinny Del Negro, the biggest adjustment I would make is I would get 4 guys on the tape tonight and highlight every single time Marc Gasol pushed someone, every single time Zach Randolph grabbed Blake Griffin under the rim, and send that to the league, because I think if the referees let the game be so physical, and it's going both ways. I'm not saying that it was, biased refereeing by any means. They just let guys get away with a lot. I don't see how the Clippers can move those guys out. If they're going to let them just come right out the back, I don't really see how the Clippers can win a rebounding advantage in this type of physical play. Like you said earlier with Blake, a lot of times it was him out of position, and I think that definitely killed him on the offensive glass. But you can't get out rebounded like that and turn over the ball, lose the possession battle. We've talked about it all year. That's the thing that the Clippers have done, is always win that possession battle, take care of the ball, and usually do a pretty good job on the glass. So you just can't do that and really expect to win.
Yeah, DJ, I agree with that. Sorry, Jordan. Just one quick thing. I agree that it was physical both ways, and that was kind of allowed, which I think when we were talking about the Clippers being maybe jittery or making mistakes that they might not usually do, in Game 2 tonight, it was a little more forced, I thought, by Memphis's play than in Game 1, which was kind of just maybe pressure of the moment induced, especially at the beginning of the game. This was, a lot of pressure from Memphis and physical. So,
no, look, Charlie, you're absolutely right, and I don't want to sound like I'm nitpicking, but it's just we expect such perfection as a point guard from Chris Paul. And tonight, of course, his shot couldn't have been better, but his point guard play actually was unusually sloppy at times, and I thought at times was approximating unforced errors, where he would try kind of these lobby skip passes, cross court that would be intercepted easily, or I think DJ tweeted about it. 2 or 3 quarters in a row, Chris Paul had that, ISO for the last shot of the quarter, didn't get the shot off. Just kind of, I don't know, odd, uncharacteristic mistakes, even from, this guy that we basically expect to be perfect at all times.
Yeah, Jordan, why do you think that is from what you saw? Is it the increased tempo they were playing at? Because it looked like to me they were playing a little bit faster than usual, and as we know, Chris Paul really likes to slow down playing the half court. Was that it, or is this just kind of a weird game from him where he just made some uncharacteristic mistakes?
It did feel to me just like a weird game. And, I know you said earlier that, you're not pointing fingers at any kind of biased refereeing, and neither am I. Reffing is reffing, and you should expect not to get the calls on the road in a playoff game.
Yep.
But it was a 39-18 free throw differential, and I think that differential was even greater if you just look at second half free throws. And I think the Clippers were taken out of their game both by the physical play, but also obviously frustrated, even on TV, by not getting those calls. The end of quarter possessions obviously are a secondary issue, and that has driven me nuts all season. Like, I love Chris Paul, but why he doesn't like to start those plays until there's 5 or 6 seconds left on the clock, I just don't understand. Why you don't want to start moving there with 11 or 12 seconds. But that's just a pet peeve.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead, DJ.
Yeah, I was just going to say, most of the time he's, pretty good at least getting a shot off, but he's got to take into account that now he's going up against some elite, defenders, where against the average teams, he can make one move and go by and score. And I think a lot of times on those particular possessions, he'd kick to the corner and the guys had no time but to shoot, and the Grizzlies are just so good at closing out. I think that's the reason why we've seen Randy Foye be quiet, and the only real shots Mo got were bad ones, off the dribble, pulling up, guy in his face. So I think give the Grizzlies a lot of credit for those end of quarter plays too, just for being so aware and closing out on the perimeter shooter so well.
Definitely.
But yeah, start earlier for sure. I'm with you.
Look, it's a place they missed Karan. There was a play in the first half where Blake, with about 3 seconds left, kicked it to Bobby Simmons in the corner, and that was a shot that Karan, with that lightning fast release, gets up. And with Bobby Simmons taking that extra second, I forget who got over Tony Allen to block the shot. But it makes a big difference not to have that quick release artist kind of in the corner there against this team.
Yeah, DJ, I think you nailed it that Chris Paul hadn't adjusted to the bigger, more elite level guards that the Grizzlies were throwing at him. I think the Clippers had an end of possession opportunity after every quarter, with the exception of the fourth quarter, and Chris Paul missed every single one. They didn't get a shot off on any of them. And normally, when you're watching them all year, Chris Paul likes to go 7, 8 seconds left on the clock to make sure that there's no time remaining, and the Clippers are the only one. But he went at like 5 because he was so focused on trying to keep those defenders away. Something that was kind of interesting is in the third quarter, I think it was the third quarter, maybe part of the fourth, we suddenly got a lot of weird injuries. Bledsoe hit his funny bone again, like Chris Paul did late in the season. Mo Williams had some issue with his shooting hand. Nick Young earlier in the game had some kind of problem with his shooting thumb. Do you guys think that this injury problem is just a fluke, or is it like I think Charlie was saying earlier about the officiating? Is it just a product of them not calling anything? Charlie, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it was physical. I do think those injuries tend to be kind of fluky just by nature. I mean, it definitely didn't help. As I'm looking through the box score tonight, was one of those rare nights when none of the, what do we call them, the 4 shooter, none of them had a big night. Foye, Mo, Nick, or I guess Bobby Simmons in this case. They just weren't a threat. So.
Yeah. We just got a Twitter comment. Isaac Olson says, the answer's easy. They shot 21 more free throws than us. That won't happen in LA. Jordan, do you think it's just that easy? Send a bunch of tape to the league, have them clean up the refereeing, and I guess crash the boards a little better?
I wish it was that easy, but unfortunately there's 2 big problems. One is the Grizzlies' style of play, especially in the slowed down half-court offense, is going to draw more fouls, frankly, than the Clippers. And if that's not true, the guys who are going to be drawing those fouls are going to be guys who can't hit free throws for the Clippers. It's going to be Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, and Caron Butler. So saying that the free throw disparity is the difference, the truth is very often when the Clippers do get to the line, it's not the 75% clip we saw in Game 1. It's going to be somewhere between 55 and 65%. So yeah, I expect to see that gap narrowed in Games 3 and 4. But there were so many other warning signs in this game, the offensive rebounds and the turnovers and the points in the paint, that the free throws were just, one red flag. I hardly think that that's a fix-all.
Yeah. Speaking of the injuries, we obviously don't know the extent of any or the seriousness of any of those injuries yet, unless you guys have heard something and I'm out of the loop. But
there was
can the Clippers
loan that said they were all okay.
Okay, well that's good. Well, just hypothetically then, who can the Clippers least afford to lose at this point between those three guys, Nick Young, Mo Williams, and Eric Bledsoe?
Charlie, you know the answers to this.
Listen, my guy did not have a great game this evening. As Kevin said, this was not the finest stretch of his young career. But, I mean, he did play 7 minutes, and I don't know how many guys can get into a rhythm in 7 minutes. I think, frankly, for his length, it's probably Nick Young. You know, between him and Foy, they should be able to stretch the floor enough. At this point, I think Mo probably doesn't have the physicality to compete in this kind of a series in a slow down half court style game. What do you guys think?
You know, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would say it's Nick Young just because he's the only guy out of those four who was, you know, still able to get his normal shot off basically against this Grizzlies team. I think because of the length and because of the quickness, you know, whatever it is that Nick Young does, which may or may not be a thing that you want on your team, he can still evidently do in the playoffs. Whereas like Mo and Foy, just, you know, they're coming around screens and the shots aren't there.
Yeah, Andrew just said it in the chat here. His normal shot is a high degree of difficulty. So
Right.
He's almost like Dirk in a way. That defense doesn't even matter. He might as well be out there playing by himself because he's just going to shoot whatever he wants to. So
Yeah, I really think it might be Eric Bledsoe. I didn't want Mo to be seriously injured, but it really feels like he's going to be completely ineffective. They could put their third best defender on Mo, and it's just going to shut him down. And on defense, we already know that he's kind of a liability.
Not kind of a liability.
Well, we're trying to be nice here, a little bit nice. But that I still think about that Chris Paul, Eric Bledsoe backcourt in the fourth quarter of Game 1, and I don't think we saw them out there together at all this game, did we?
No. But I think one thing to remember is that lineup kind of works when it's a lineup that's working together to cause turnovers, you know, and to push the pace. Bledsoe by himself, you know, in a lineup with Mo Williams, who's the opposite of creating turnovers on the other end, you know, in a half-court game where his turnover issues are going to be kind of magnified, it doesn't really work that well. And the other thing is, as much as I'd love to see that lineup as well, it's not something you really try out at this point in the playoffs, I don't think.
Well, let's talk about lineups for a second then. What did you guys think of Nick Young and the Bobby Simmons experiments at small forward? Rudy Gay had a ridiculously efficient game, 9 for 13, missed his only three-pointer, 3 for 4 from the free throw line, 5 rebounds, 21 points. DJ, who did you like on Rudy?
Gosh, it was tough. I mean, at first I thought Simmons did a much better job because as soon as Nick Young came in the game, I think Gay had at least 3 shots right in a row and made it look pretty easy as far as getting his jumper up over the top of him. You know, I don't know. I think you almost have to play the guy who offers more offensively, and just deal with Gay getting his. I don't know that Simmons is gonna, you know, really stop Gay from doing what he wants to do. So I think you gotta roll with the better offensive player in my mind.
Which down the stretch was Bobby Simmons. That was when I really knew the Clippers weren't going to come back tonight. Was when Mike and Ralph were talking about how Bobby Simmons was the #1 offensive option.
Oh boy,
that's never a formula for victory. But look, I'm with you, DJ. For the first 5 or 6 minutes, I was sitting here watching the game, you know, and Manny and I were talking about what a great big body Bobby Simmons had, and you know.
You're doing the Ralph Lawler, Corey Maggette technique? Yeah. His body is incredible.
Right. I was like, we should be playing this guy the whole year. And then Rudy Gay started hitting shots. You know, Nick said it earlier. Neither one of these guys did a terrible job against Rudy Gay. These weren't wide open shots. A lot of them were tough shots. They were from 8 or 10 or 12 feet away, but they were, you know, moving with a hand in his face. He's just going to hit shots sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like a conventional matchup goes, I think the two did fine. I think, you know, you take your guys that size-wise kind of match up with him, and the platoon, you know, did the best I think you could hope for. I think Bobby had 21 minutes and Nick Young had 24, and I would probably want that to be skewed a little bit more towards Nick Young. But it occurs to me now, like as I'm thinking about it, and we talked about this last time, maybe you go with, like a Foy or a Bledsoe or something, and kind of like bait them into the post-up game, because as we talked, that's not Gay's strength, and maybe you have someone who's quick and physical on him, and then bring help if you need to, or something like that. I don't know. I mean, obviously, how they adjust to Rudy Gay is kind of going to be one of the big keys as the series goes forward, I think.
Yeah. Here's what I would do, and it sounds a little weird, but I would let Zach Randolph do whatever he wants. I would stop fronting him. I would encourage them to enter the ball to Zach Randolph, because Blake Griffin is such a better defender when he's directly challenged, as opposed to rotating and coming over and boxing out and picking up the right guy. He's just always a step behind in rotations, or they're non-existent at all. So I would encourage them to go to Zach Randolph, because then it's out of Gay's hands. And as we know, Zach Randolph, of course, he made huge strides last year, but he's still not the best passer out of the post. Okay, let's not pretend that he's this guy who's finding cutters all the time and is this amazing low post passer. He wants to look for his own shot when he gets it on the block. That's his thing. So I would stop fronting him at all. Encourage they go to him, because in the first two games at least, I felt that those possessions usually end up much worse than the ones with Conley getting the ball in penetration or Gay doing his thing. So I would encourage Zach Randolph to beat them.
Just to close this small forward debate we were having earlier, that position tonight gave us 8 for 12, 4 for 5 from 3 for 20 points. So that's not bad as a Nick Young, Bobby Simmons platoon at the small forward position. Jeremy wants to know, why do you guys think that Reggie Evans didn't get more minutes down the stretch, considering how great he played in Game 1? Jordan, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, because lightning doesn't strike twice. I mean, at the end of the day, Reggie Evans does some good things on the basketball. That's not even true. He does one good thing on a basketball court, which is grab rebounds.
Don't you think that the Clippers needed that, though, since they were roundly out-rebounded?
I hate to be the negative Nancy here, but he almost had a 15 trillion. Played 15 minutes and had 1 rebound. He doesn't need more minutes. He needs more rebounds.
Yeah, and down the stretch actually was not when the rebounds were killing them. It was mostly in the second and third quarter that the rebounds were killing them. And so if our listener is asking why Reggie Evans wasn't there down the stretch, it's because for most of the season, Charlie and I have had a joke that Reggie Evans should wear like a red shirt, like a red shirt freshman for a college team, so that Chris Paul knows not to pass to him in the lane. In some ways, it's a flawed joke because the Clippers wear red jerseys. But
maybe the yellow QB thing that those guys
the yellow
wear,
QB
maybe.
penny is more
there you go.
For. But yeah, that's why he wasn't in down the stretch.
Yeah, just one quick thing. Another reason why, obviously the fronting Blake didn't help, and the DeAndre kind of being pushed away from the hoop, but they, as we said, they got a lot of rebounding from their perimeter guys. Tony Allen had 5, Gay had 5, Mayo had 4, and Pondexter had 2. I mean, it was really, and Bledsoe, who is probably their best, the Clippers' second best behind Paul rebounding guard, he only had 7 minutes, so they weren't, whenever the matchup was uneven, Minnesota or Memphis was going to get those rebounds.
And to that point, the Clippers' small forward platoon that we were just praising for their offense performance, and rightly so, in a combined 45 minutes, 1 rebound.
Right.
So, just to jump in quickly, DJ, I like your suggestion, about adjustments going forward on Randolph. What do you think about other adjustments that are going to be coming off this game? I mean, is it more minutes for Bledsoe in order to have to counter those wing rebounders? Gosh,
it's tough. I mean, I'm always in favor of more minutes for Bledsoe. I've long said that in this series, the Clippers need to play their athleticism. They need to go to their athletic guys. As you guys know, I'm not the biggest Nick Young fan. I want tons of Nick Young because he's the only guy who can, really attack those hard closeouts and get there. But as far as the defensive rebounds go, man, when they have all their guys flying to the glass like that, and I think a big part of it was they weren't shooting a lot of long shots, so they weren't getting burned with long rebounds. It was almost like a Moses Malone type offense from them. Just throw it up on the glass and go get it. I don't know. I honestly don't know what they can do about that. What the wings can do. I mean, I guess they box out, but you want them to leak out. I don't know. Jordan, what do you think?
I asked you because you know more about basketball than I do.
No, dude, I have,
and I have no idea. I mean, I think, frankly, and I don't want to seem too negative about it, they split in Memphis. That's a great thing, haggle or no haggle. But at the end of the day, the Clippers lost 7 of 8 quarters in Memphis, basically. I mean, it felt like that's not true statistically. They won the second quarter in one of the games, but I mean, for 7 of 8 quarters, it felt like Memphis's series, Memphis's pace, Memphis's style of play. And I don't know what the adjustments are coming home.
That's an interesting point. Do you guys feel like Memphis is the better team right now?
I do not.
I do.
I do as well. I feel especially the way
Get
that
off here, you two.
I wish I didn't, but to me the X factor is that Blake has been so severely limited that it doesn't feel to me like the Clippers. I expected it to feel like the Clippers had the best 2 players in the series,
right?
And that Memphis then had 3 through whatever. But it doesn't even feel like that to me right now. Andrew, tell me why I'm being too negative.
I think you're being too negative because no one on the Clippers roster outside of Nick Young, surprisingly, can hit anything from the outside, and that just allows Memphis to sit there and put 4 or 5 people in the paint. What is Blake supposed to do against the entire Grizzlies defense? It's kind of like how I think Atlanta and New York both played the Clippers this way in the last 2 games. They can't do anything about Chris Paul, but they're going to do their best with Blake Griffin and dare everyone else to beat them, and it's not happening. It's that Dwight Howard defensive strategy that people employ against Orlando. But
aren't you making my point, which is that that's a flawed team, and Memphis has figured out the key to beating that team, and maybe Memphis is the better team right now.
Well, there's no question the Clippers are flawed. We know that.
Right.
I mean, I just think when we talk about those last few games of the season, Blake Griffin was awesome. He's been the opposite of that in these 2. Not the opposite. He's been fighting, and I think you're right. They've been really physical with him, and the rest have kind of let that go. But these 3-point shooters haven't had any open looks. I mean, nothing has been in rhythm. Nothing's been off ball movement. There's been nothing, and I think Memphis gets a lot of credit for that. When we ask who's the better team, I'm inclined to say they're really evenly matched, or the Clippers might even have a slight edge just because of those 2 great players. But it's all about system and how things work together. And Chris, obviously, they can throw 3 really, really, really good defenders on Chris Paul and then pack the paint on Blake Griffin and challenge the Clippers to beat them with ball movement, which just isn't their strength.
And this is kind of what I wanted to go to next. We saw a little bit of it in the second half. The jumbo package. We're not getting anything out of those wing players right now. So why don't we just stick Kenyon Martin, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan, or Reggie Evans, whatever, any combination of the 3 out there with Chris Paul and Eric Bledsoe, and let them just go after every single offensive and defensive rebounds. I really like to call it the Jumbako package after that.
The Jumbako package.
Exactly. First you have a Jumbo Jet, then you get Jumbakos.
Thank you so much for that.
Before I settled on Clipperheimer as a Twitter handle, I seriously considered Jumbako 69.
Lost opportunity.
Yeah.
What do you think about the jumbo package?
You can fight. You can fight fire with fire, I guess, and try and win that rebounding battle and try and get those extra possessions. Ultimately, though, I think Chris Paul and Blake Griffin need as much space as they can possibly get. And I don't know that putting Kenyon out there, he may pick up a couple offensive rebounds, but it's going to hurt every possession when those guys can just sink in the paint. I think the big thing for Blake is he has to score in single coverage, and he has to go quick. If he's got Marc Gasol on him, he's got to go around him and score. If he's got Zach Randolph on him, he's got to rise above him and score. And Chris Paul has to be perfect. Chris Paul can't be, have the problems with the distribution and all that he did tonight, the turnovers. Chris Paul has to be perfect. Blake Griffin has to score against single coverage, and the Clippers can win this series. But if both of those things don't happen, the Grizzlies are the better team, I think, and the Clippers are going to have trouble. But that being said, I think Chris Paul has the capability to still win this series, and I think at home they're going to be a little bit tougher to beat.
Yeah. A Twitter person, Isaac Olsen.
A Twitter person.
I don't know what else.
Is that Nick Flint?
It's got to be Nick Flint.
He did say that Memphis is the worse road team than the Clippers are, so maybe we are just a little down coming off of that first game comeback high with this second. I don't even know what to call the second game. It's like Jordan's been saying all night. It was just a weird game. But Memphis hasn't been the best team on the road. So just coming out of Memphis with a split, maybe regaining home court advantage, that's enough, and we should just be grateful for that. Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you think when you go into a series and you take 1 of 2 on the road. My problem is I think they should have had home court advantage. So, they lost that. For where they are, I think it's a win, but they lost that in the last few games of the season. So, that's that.
By the way, I'm completely on board with this Arnovitz theory that turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Because I actually think it was so clear these 2 games that there were postseason jitters, which I always scoffed at. I always thought this idea of postseason experience was highly overrated. But I actually think it's going to turn out to be the right formula, which is that they got those postseason jitters out of the way in Memphis, where they're expected to lose anyway, stole a game regardless, and maybe hopefully can now start playing their best basketball at home. Anyway, that's what I've come to believe, and that's how I've come to rationalize those final 2 losses.
I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. The one thing I would say is I think Memphis again has caused a lot of the issues. There were a few moments that just looked disjointed, and also the Clippers just frankly they thrive in a system that doesn't resist them, where they're the team that's aggressive when they're the one that's bringing it to the other team. Again, they don't have great creators off the wings. If you can kind of limit Chris Paul and crowd Blake Griffin, if no one else is going to beat you, that's kind of the game plan.
Yeah, I feel like Game 1 was very Clipper-esque, fourth quarter comeback. Game 2 is very Grizzlies-esque, with them doing their thing and getting turnovers and rebounds. So it'd be interesting to see how this series looks when the 2 teams kind of meet in the middle. I don't know. Gay is going to be tough, man. I'm worried about how the Clippers stop him, but we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully everyone's healthy going in, because I don't think they can afford to lose any of those guys, or else we're going to have to defossilize Ryan Gomes.
Was this game really that out of hand? I mean, the Clippers were up after the first quarter, and it just seemed like we saw it pretty much the entire season. They put that whole second unit in at the start of the second, and the offense, defense, everything just kind of fell apart. And by the time Blake Griffin and Chris Paul both got back into the game, it was like a 1-point game, and the Grizzlies were starting to pull away. Was it just that the rotation was too deep, and Vinny should just go 6, 7, maybe 8 players deep? Charlie?
I don't know. I didn't feel like the game was in Memphis's hands for most of the time. Again, I think the Clippers did tire or get beat up by the end. And obviously Bledsoe did not have his best night, but it was also not really an ideal situation for him in just a few minutes trying to run the show. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm with you, Charlie. Not that, look, all these macro issues that we've been talking about, they're all true. And they all are, quote, the reason that the Clippers lost the game. But Andrew's right in that sometimes we lose sight of micro moments where the game was right there on the balance. And, the moment I think of is early in the fourth quarter, the Clippers had cut it to 5. Bledsoe was in. There was kind of a scramble possession where Bledsoe had the ball, and it was the possession he got hurt on.
Right.
where it was clearly a foul. It turned into a fast break the other way. Bledsoe got hurt. All of a sudden, it's 9. Instead of, Bledsoe making that drive or the Clippers getting that call and potentially cutting it to 4 or 5. And so, yeah, as much as we talk about all these ways that the Clippers were crushed and it's just disaster, yeah, there are these small micro moments where you say, had that been different, this game could have turned out very differently. So you're right, Andrew. I think we get caught up maybe too much sometimes in the gloom and doom of the bigger narratives.
Well, I'm really invested because I do have the Clippers penciled in for Western Conference Finals, so
you got your reputation riding on the line.
Yeah, and you're the only one brave enough to use the royal we when talking about the Clips, so you're stuck in there.
After that comeback game 1, I'm too in. I'm totally invested now.
Their fate is your fate.
Game 3.
Don't do that. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
Game 3. It's on Saturday. It's a day game. What do you think's gonna happen, DJ? Let's start with you.
Oh, I am gonna be a Clipper homer again and predict a win. I had reservations about predicting a win for this game in Game 2, but I did, so I'm not gonna say anything. But yeah, I think the Clippers. Their first game back home, they take it, let's say, 104-96.
Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, because I don't claim to have any insight into the morale of the locker room or the momentum or whatever that is, I think I'm just keep picking the Clippers because I think the 2 best players again on the court are on the team. The other thing is I think that they can compete with a physical style of play as long as they're getting to the line as much as the Grizzlies. They might shoot 50%, but more foul trouble for Memphis, more attempts at the line. And I think the way that Blake Griffin's playing, that's got to happen. I mean, maybe there's some politicking that needs to be involved. Maybe, reason 1,050 why Phil Jackson might be a better coach than Vinny Del Negro is that he might be better at politicking. Because that was his whole thing during the playoffs. He'd always get under the refs' skin and get all the calls. But, yeah, I'll take the Clippers again.
Yeah, look, I'll make it a trifecta only because DJ earlier said, well, okay, the formula for the Clippers is Blake attacking quickly when he has single coverage, agreed, and Chris Paul playing a perfect game. And, when DJ said that, my first impulse, of course, was to shy away from the word perfect. But what has Chris Paul proven this season, if not that he's a man beyond hyperbole? I mean, every time you think that you're going over the top to describe the way the guy plays, he plays better. I mean, he's just sick.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm expecting after 2 pretty uncharacteristically, up and down games for Paul, despite the fact that, of course, he was unconscious shooting tonight, I do expect to see that perfect game, or that near perfect game in Game 3. We'll see.
Wow. So you and DJ both like the Grizzlies as a better team, but you picked the Clippers for Game 3.
My heart and my head are often in disagreement. It's a major problem in my life, not just with the Clippers.
Exactly what he said.
We're getting asked to count our chickens a little before they've hatched. Jeremy wants to know if the Clippers can take both games at home. Does that pretty much seal the series? Like, will the Clippers win it in 6?
We can't, come on, guys. Karma-wise, we can't answer that question. It's bad enough that you even asked it on
Answer the people's question, Jordan.
Go on the record.
They want to know.
Yes, if they take games 3 and 4, they will also win Game 6. And then they will go on to beat the Spurs in 7 and the Thunder in 5.
I like the feeling of forcing Jordan into predictions he has no interest in making. It's a very entertainment segment. I feel like we should do this more often. I agree. I think if they win both games at home, they have it. And to your point, Andrew, going back a little bit, rewinding, if you look at it, the Grizzlies were desperate. They had to have this win. You can't start off 0-2 at home. So I don't think the Clippers should be demoralized. I think they did what they had to do, right? The talking heads always say you got to take one. You take 1-1, you get the home court advantage back, and it's a series. And I think the Clippers are definitely in a series at this point. It should go long.
Yeah. I think the Clippers are going to win Game 3, but I think the Clippers should have won this game too. The two regular season games, whoever won the rebounding battle basically won the game. And game 1, Clippers came out rough on the boards, but cleaned it up towards the end. They ended up winning that game. Grizzlies, they destroyed the Clippers on the boards tonight, and they ended up winning this game. My biggest concern is that tonight the Clippers shot 13 for 18, 72% from the line, and I can't help but thinking about this NBA Today podcast that Henry Abbott ran a couple of weeks ago with Justin Rao about how teams at home feel the pressure a little bit more and have a tendency to miss free throws more. It's the home team that feels that pressure, not the road team. And I really worry about their free throw shooting in Game 3. I think that's going to be critical. Let's see here. Lawler's Law wants to know, should the Clips get past Memphis but get bounced by the Spurs? Does VDN get re-ups? Okay, last question. Clips get past Memphis, but they lose in a spirited round 2 game versus...
How spirited are we talking here?
Let's say 6 games. 6 games, and they're all close. None of them are blowouts. Does VDN come back next season, Jordan?
I pretend no first-hand knowledge here, but on the Clipper podcast last week, Kevin Arnovitz said that his information, or what he was hearing, was that actually, you know, there may be a chance that Vinny does come back for next year on the option, just because there's kind of a weak coaching field out there right now. There aren't any great candidates. I think we can assume Neil O'Shea is wise enough to ask that question of, before I fire someone, who am I going to hire? So I think if the Clippers can get past this, this series, there's a good chance we see Vinny again next season, which I know may not make a lot of Clipper fans happy. But I guess we'll see. Again, that's not anything I know firsthand, but it's just something that Kevin happened to have mentioned.
Passing along the goods.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that too, and it made me come down a little bit off my original stance that the Clippers had to go to the Western Conference Finals for Vinny to retain his job. Now they have the 4 seed. I don't think that's the case.
5 seed.
I mean, 5 seed. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I don't know. There are some good coaches out there, but they all come with big question marks, right? We have to see what happens in Oklahoma City with Scotty Brooks. We're assuming Rick Carlisle comes back to Dallas. Stan Van Gundy is the obvious choice, but we don't know if Chris Paul wants to play for him. Chris Paul is good friends with Dwight Howard. We don't know. And is Stan Van Gundy a guy who's very open with the media about the inner workings of a basketball team, the right fit for a Donald Sterling-owned team? You got to take these things into consideration when Stan Van Gundy is a great coach, but I just don't know. So I think if the Clippers have to, it has to be a really good showing, I think, in the second round for Vinny to get that option picked up. I think if they make it out of this series and get swept, they're in trouble. I mean, Vinny's in trouble. They're in trouble too. We're all in trouble.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Charlie. Just real quick, the Donald Sterling thing is such a key thing here, right? Because we know from several lawsuits that are still ongoing, not always the quickest guy to pay out fired coaches. So while there are a lot of great coaches out there, I feel like there's this kind of disaster scenario where what do you do if you hire a Mike D'Antoni or Stan Van Gundy and Chris Paul absolutely hates it?
Right. And that's a very
right. Is Donald Sterling going to fire a guy and pay him for 3 years? Yeah.
Yep.
So
that's a very real possibility with Stan Van Gundy or anybody else.
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, Vinny's not going to be fired. He's just not going to be re-signed if they don't.
No, not Vinny. The next coach.
Right. Okay, yeah. I think the Sterling factor is important, but not as much in the payment as just the decision-making autonomy that Neil O'Shea has. I mean, I don't have much inside knowledge either, but I think we know from the hiring process last time that O'Shea didn't want to hire Dunleger in the first place. He's a smart Neil is a very smart guy. I think he sees what most of us see as the weaknesses with Vinny. But last time he wasn't allowed to make his decision of Dwayne Casey like he wanted to. Neal's contract isn't guaranteed for next year either.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm kind of like you, DJ. My impression was Neal's smart enough to say it doesn't really matter how good Chris Paul and Blake Griffin are in the playoffs. He knows what he has in Vinny. But I do think it has to be a really spirited run, you know, if it's up to Neal.
Here's what I think happens very quickly. I think Neal gets in a room with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin once the season's down, and he says, who do you guys want as our coach? Do you want to stick with Vinny? Do you want someone else that's out there? And Chris Paul says, I want Byron Scott. And Neal says, no, we can't have Byron Scott. And Blake Griffin says, I want Kelvin Sampson. And Neal says, we'll think about that one. And I really honestly think that's how it goes and how it probably should go. And then Neal goes to Donald Sterling and says, hey, you owe me one. Give me the coach that these guys want. And he gets Chris Paul and Blake Griffin to say, we're playing for this guy. You better hire him as a coach. If I were Neal, that's what I would do. You got to leverage your stars. Get them the guy that they want, but then get the guy that you want by having them say they want him. Does that make any sense? Manipulate Donald Sterling. He's been doing it for years. You got to pay him back.
Yeah, I mean, just one quick thing is that, you know, as much as we like to talk about the possibility that, I mean, first of all, there's zero possibility that Blake Griffin's going anywhere until his next contract is up. And I don't even think that there's a good chance that Paul's going anywhere.
There's not a lot of good landing spots for Paul.
What's that?
There's not a ton of good landing spots for Paul.
Right. I mean, it's just, you know, he's in LA. I mean, there's enough things working in the favor of the Clippers, you know, and it's almost like you don't call their bluff. I mean, you do. The whole point of whatever move you make is to keep Chris Paul in Los Angeles. But it's
in a Clipper uniform in Los Angeles, because that is a landing spot.
Right.
Like, not really though, because the Lakers would have to trade someone. They would have to trade someone to get Chris Paul. They have no space.
They won't have any space even after next year.
Even after next year, I still don't think they have any
Kobe
space.
Bryant's making about $40 million for the next 3 years.
That is true. He's their
Mitch
top
Kupchak can do it.
That's
Kupchak can do it.
The big thing here is that Chris Paul, even if Chris Paul wants to go somewhere else, all the teams that would be contending don't have the space to get him. So it seems like it would be unlikely from a salary cap standpoint. Obviously, if he wants to go somewhere, he's going to go somewhere. I think this Sterling thing is not paying people is a little bit overblown because Olshey has done a good job managing people's contracts. Dunleavy had that 5-year contract, and then I think they canned him after 3. So with Vinny, he brought him in for a 3-year deal, but the 3rd year was a team option. They could probably do like a 3-year guaranteed deal for, let's say, Stan Van Gundy or someone else. And what's the likelihood that they're really going to fire that coach with 3 years on before the 3 years are up with Blake Griffin and Chris Paul on the roster? That's just my opinion on that. But I didn't give my Game 3 prediction. I'm definitely predicting the Clippers win. Let's say 101-88 because I still think the Grizzlies' offense is suspect.
Fair enough.
I hope we're all right.
So, we've gone on far too long. Wrapping this up for Charlie Widows, DJ Foster, Jordan Heimer, I'm Andrew Hahn. We'll see you for Game 3. Thanks for tuning in.